Pleasure to have you all here. A diverse group, lots of people with kind of scientific and technical backgrounds. I don't want to stereotype, they're not ones we would normally find gravitating towards a class on creativity and innovation. So how many of you here tonight feel as though inherently you're a pretty creative person? You would describe yourself that way, okay? How many of you would like to be a creative person? How many of you are here hoping tonight by sitting in this class somehow, by osmosis, you will walk out that door and you'll be a more creative person? Okay. I'm not sure I can do that last thing for you, but I will upon you all that I can. And I will share with you some of the things that I've learned. Just to supplement a couple of things that Corey told you, to give you some context for where this presentation is coming from today. I have spent almost 30 years in business with some partners that have worked with businesses on a lot of different kinds of growth issues. Our focus is primarily on how do you develop compensation strategies in a way, for example, that properly recognizes innovation in a company as well as the performance engine in a company that has to keep operating. And what's the right balance there? What's the right thing for short-term versus long-term? So that's kind of what our firm does. And in the course of that work, we have been in hundreds of businesses, and we have to learn about what their business models are and how they operate and why they're successful and what they want to do with their growth and how they need to be able to fuel that. This new opportunity that Corey mentioned about the AHA Institute has kind of grown out of that experience. Most of our work is done with kind of what we call middle market businesses, even into some of the larger companies, and we run across a lot of smaller companies that want our help, and we can do some work for them sometimes, but not always. But we always find people in that environment that are trying to grow their businesses, and they need to have opportunities to really interact with the right kinds of people to get some of those breakthroughs that they need in their businesses. And so because of growing our own business and getting exposed to lots of other businesses, I've had in mind for a while to develop this other kind of side business that's going to be online community-based. And if you have interest in being part of kind of a beta group for that wouldn't have any cost associated with it, just let me know and we can talk about that afterwards. Well, when we talk about creativity, I want to tell you a little bit about where we're going with this idea. In the whole category of innovation, there's lots that we could discuss. We're really going to do about a 5-hour meeting in about an hour tonight. And that 5 hours could really be 5 days if we wanted it to be. So we're going to move quickly through a lot of material. I hope I don't leave anybody panting at the end of this. I'm going to probably talk pretty fast because I made a decision to give you more rather than less. And as a result of that, try to squeeze much out of our time together. So if I'm going too fast, just raise your hand and say, Ken, I didn't understand the last 10 minutes of what you said, and I'll at least try to give you 30 seconds of it as a summary if I could. But here's where we're going. Let's discuss tonight a little bit about what do we mean when we talk about innovation and why it matters at all to even think about this subject. How does it occur? What's the process in which innovation really takes place? How do we execute it once we have it occurring and make sure we're implementing what it is we want to do with our ideas? And how do we leverage that? What are tools and resources that are available to us to allow us to really advance what we're doing at a more accelerated pace than we might otherwise? I see lots of you taking notes, and that's a good thing to do. I want you to know as well that if you come at the end of the meeting and you take my card and you send me an email if you want the slides that you're seeing tonight, I'll be happy to send them to you. Doesn't mean you shouldn't write things down while we're talking, but I want you to know that those will be available to you if you'd like to do that as well. Tonight, I'm not going to try to give you citations for everything I say. I just want to tell you at the outset, there's no original ideas here tonight. One of the things you're going to learn about innovation and creativity is that it really is something that is not born from nothing. Innovation doesn't come out of creating something that didn't exist before. It's really more a matter of building on things that already have existed. So you see just some of the resources that have gone into what you're going to hear about tonight. I'm not going to try to segment that out for you. This is kind of a distillation of a lot of things that I've experienced as well as I've read, and so as we go through this material, just know that this is some of the sources that material is going to come from. Well, let's talk about why it matters. When we look at this whole idea of innovation, let me just give you one little picture of that. We heard from Steve Churm from Churm Media a couple of months ago at our Management Society meeting, and he shared this data with us that I thought was pretty staggering. Churm Media produces OC Metro that you might have seen around, OC Family, and some of the other publications that are put out by that business. And he said, if you want to get some concept just on the media side of things about the tectonic shift that's really taken place in the last several years, he says, just think about it this way. It took radio 38 years to reach 50 million users. It took TV 13 years. It took the internet just 4 years. It took Facebook less than 9 months. Now, Facebook is now 800 million members, and if it were a country, it would be the third largest country in the world. So if you think you can ignore innovation in today's environment, no matter what your role in society is, then you're probably mistaken, because you're going to get left behind on a lot of things if you're not paying attention to what's happening. 1.1 billion pieces of Facebook content are shared daily. So it just gives you some idea of the pace at which innovation is occurring and information is being passed on. That also represents for us an opportunity, and that's what we want to focus on this evening. So as you look at this information that we're going to share, there's really kind of two core questions that you want to really ask yourself. Number one, how will you impact that innovation explosion? What is your role in that? And how will that take place for you? And then number two, how does the innovation that is taking place going to be able to assist you in the innovation you're trying to create and the creativity that you're trying to magnify? So those are really kind of the two core issues that we're trying to address in what we talk about. Well, let's talk for just a minute about who the innovators are. So just help me out here for just a second. As you think about innovation and you think about innovators, just tell me some names that come to mind. Okay, that's the obvious one, right? In fact, this whole evening could be a homage to Steve Jobs if you wanted it to be, given some events in the last month or so. And we could learn a lot from that. Steve Jobs, what else? Just shout him out here.
Thomas Edison.
Thomas Edison, okay?
Walt Disney.
Walt Disney.
Henry Ford.
Henry Ford.
No one said Bill Gates yet?
Okay, keep going.
My brother-in-law, Tony Marlin. Not known, but.
Ken's brother-in-law, one of the great innovators. Yeah, you haven't heard of that yet, but you will, right? Other names? There's a real obvious one to me that you're missing.
The Facebook guy.
The Facebook, Mark.
Yeah, he's pretty good as well, but there's still a more obvious one than that you're missing.
A historical figure.
No, okay. Well, there's a lot of names there that we haven't hit yet, but there's one that's not on this list either that I'm really surprised, a little disappointed, frankly, that you didn't get.
I know it's the hair.
Oh, yes. Hey, so coffee table book about coffee table.
Yeah.
Where did you come up with this idea?
Well, I'll tell you, Regis. Actually, this is a true story. I was skiing at the time.
You know, when I'm skiing, Kramer, I'm trying not to kill myself. You're writing books.
Well, now, you kids don't go out and try that. You stay in school.
Have you always had an interest in coffee tables? Because really, I love coffee tables,
Oh.
and I thought I was the only one.
See, the beauty of my book is, if you don't have a coffee table, it turns into a coffee table.
Okay, so I'm sorry that you didn't remember one of the great innovators, but just so you understand, if you didn't relate to this segment, I'm not sure you and I are going to have a relationship this evening, so if that was hard for you to sit through, then you may want to attend another class, because to me, Kramer is one of the great innovators of all time. Let's look at this probably better picture here of those that we commonly think about when we think about innovation. Any pictures on there that you don't recognize?
The woman in the middle of the second row from the bottom, holding a book up.
That one? Somebody help help him out. Can you read who the book is?
Yes.
It's not Martha Stewart.
Barbara Stewart.
Harry Potter?
The J.K. Rowling. Okay, it's J.K. Rowling. Okay. Anybody know who this is? Anybody involved with architecture?
Frank Lloyd Wright.
Frank Lloyd Wright, yeah, okay. Everybody know who this guy is? Andrew Lloyd Webber, okay. Now see, as you pick out some of those people, this is going to be an interesting exercise for you to think about innovation, because one of the things that you're going to learn here this evening is innovation is in part about diversity and diversity of exposure. And the greater your diversity and your exposure, the greater your possibilities are of having innovations occur in your life. We're going to talk in just a minute a little bit about how our minds are organized and how they work and why that diversity is so important. But as you look at this group of people here, what would you say is a common denominator amongst these people? Very diverse things that they've been involved with, right?
Willing to take risks.
Okay, certainly that.
Not the norm.
Okay, good, not the norm. Kirk, nice to see you.
They didn't give up.
They didn't give up, okay,
I'd say they have a high level of belief in themselves,
good.
and determination to, bring their vision to life.
They probably all had terrific mentors that they followed.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the case with every one of these. As you listen to any of them talk, they do talk about that. I think too, as you look at this, as you look at some of the common denominators, I mean, Apple kind of got it right when they came up with this whole idea of think different. If they were grammatically correct, they would say think differently, wouldn't they? So we won't fault them for that because they've done okay for themselves. But this whole concept that Steve Jobs kind of presented of think different is really kind of the common denominator of all of those people that you looked at, along with all the other things that you mentioned. And we want to talk a little bit about how innovators really think differently. And not only do they think differently, they get others and they persuade others to all of a sudden believe in their new reality. You think about just what Steve Jobs did alone in the time that he was on Earth. He created a new reality, didn't he? He had us doing things that we didn't think were really even conceivable to be able to do. Products that we couldn't conceive of having, that he created. So it's not only a matter of thinking differently, it's a matter of being able to persuade other people to the way that you think and to a new reality that they should be thinking about. Now let me ask you this question. What do these two companies have in common, other than thinking differently?
Recognize that logo.
They have interesting logos, all right? Recognized, okay, so they're a strong brand. You recognize those brands?
Yeah, they were the first to do something specific.
Okay, good. Well, you're gonna see a new thought here that you probably wouldn't have thought about as it relates to these two companies. How is Ralph Lauren like Apple? They're both tech companies. Now, how many of you thought about Ralph Lauren as a tech company? Probably none of you, right? What is Ralph Lauren?
Clothing.
Clothing company. What kind of clothing? Kind of high-end casual wear, right? You know, you can pay $450 to look really cool while you're out riding that horse with that sweater that you have on and the other stuff that they'll dress you in. You know, it all looks very rugged and outdoorsy and just chic at the same time. So we don't think about it as a technology store, but just to give you some sense about this whole concept of innovation and the whole idea we talked about earlier about the tectonic change in the way of thinking, the thought process that has to go on. Ralph Lauren has gone through a very interesting process in the last 10 years of really building what they call their media brand. And in building that media brand, they got David Lauren, Ralph Lauren's son, kind of a reluctant participant in the company to really come in and build a media brand for them. And this is what happened. We won't read all of that together, but let me just tell you the story real quickly. As he came into the company and started trying to build this media brand, what he was doing one day, went to see the movies and saw Minority Report, that Tom Cruise movie. You remember that stuff that he did in that movie where he's moving all holographics around with his finger like that, and all that really cool stuff, and he looked at it and go, boy, wouldn't it be cool to do that? Well, that's what David Lawrence said. In fact, he went and contacted Steven Spielberg and says, can you show me how I can get that technology? And Steven Spielberg said, well, it's not real. It doesn't really exist. It's the movies. Well, he didn't let it go, and he just kind of kept pursuing things, and pretty soon he came up with this. You'll see, you can kind of barely see in this picture here. This is Boris Becker, one of the representatives that wears the whole Ralph Lauren thing. This whole interactive thing now that they have in their stores, where you can, click on something, you can order right there what you want, you can build what you want. He went online and built a whole thing for kids wear, where you can build you watch a whole storybook, and as you watch these kids in the story online, you can order stuff that they're wearing online. And all of that really led to this whole kind of complete explosion that they've had now in technology to advance what they're doing with their wares. And that led to him, about a year ago, he went to London. They wanted to introduce what they're doing online in Great Britain as well. And so they built this 4D presentation that's going to be projected onto their storefront there in London. And we're going to watch what that looks like right now. So if you would hit those lights. We'll talk about it afterwards. Think about the Minority Report experience that David had, and we'll talk a little bit about this in just a second. This is the front of the storefront of Ralph Lauren in London. This goes on for several more minutes. Now, it goes on, it shows, Ralph Lauren watches, it shows the ties hanging off the top of the building. At the very end, Ralph Lauren comes to one of the window and waves to everybody, and then all the stuff goes back away, and it's just totally cool. Now, what were they doing here? They are making people what? Think differently about Ralph Lauren, right? We're projecting onto one of our stores the way you always view us, a different way to think about us. Now, this production that they put together, it cost like $1.5 million or something to put on, and they sold, as a result of that, one $50,000 watch. However, they had 700 million media imprints transmitted around the world as a result of this broadcast that they did. So they said, how could you possibly pay for that kind of attention? So all of a sudden, the whole world knew that Ralph Lauren was a tech company, that you could go online and do anything online that you wanted to with that brand. So when we start talking about the whole concept of innovation, one of the things that we have to get firmly in our mind is, how does this process of thinking differently occur? How do our minds work? How does a David Lauren get to the point where he thinks of something up here, as Joel movie saying, and this is what ends up, and what happens with this company as a result of that? Well, it's an important thing to consider that as in the context of really what innovation is. So if we're going to talk about innovation, it's probably important to define what we mean by innovation. So help me out again. How would you define innovation? What is innovation?
A new way of doing something.
Say that again?
A new way of doing
Okay,
something.
a new way of doing something.
New way of thinking.
Okay? Other thoughts?
Way of doing something that's never been done before.
Okay, good. A lot of things, a lot of news in there, right? Here's the way Steve Jobs talks about it, and well, before I do that, here's some related terms that we might think about when we start thinking about innovation. We heard the term new in there quite a bit. I think all of these things relate to it. And Steve Jobs said it this way. He said, innovation is really connecting things. If you think about it, that's really what he did. He connected things that weren't connected before. He says when you ask creative people how they did something, they feel a little guilty because they didn't really do it. They just saw something. They were able to connect experiences they've had and synthesize new things. Easy for me to say. So one of the things that we want to start understanding is that when we talk about innovation, it's not necessarily the same thing as invention. Invention kind of implies that you are creating something that has never existed before. Steve Jobs will tell you that that's not what he did. When he created the iPod, he wasn't really creating something that never existed before, because there was what? There was the Walkman, right? He just gave us a whole different way of thinking about how we can access music. Watch what was going on with Napster and all that other stuff that was happening in the music industry, and we'll talk more about his experience in just a minute. Innovation is also problem solving. It's understanding what problems exist right now in an environment and what needs to be innovated to solve that problem and move that logjam. Those of you that are thinking about new businesses that you're thinking about launching, one of the first things you want to think about is, as it relates to the consumer, whoever's going to be the end user of your product or service, you want to think, first of all, what problem is my product or service going to solve for them? And if you don't understand that and can't communicate that, then you're not going to be very innovative, if you will. Innovation is also fulfilled anticipation. If you think about the kinds of questions that Steve Jobs asked in the work that he didn't ask what people wanted. He asked, what do people dream about? And that's where his thoughts went, and that's where his creative energies were applied. Well, how does it occur then when we think about innovation? What we want to think about here is something that the experts call associational thinking. And we're going to talk for just a second about associational thinking and really what it means. But let me give you a clear example of this by a little exercise here for just a minute. You see on the screen a word. What is that word that you see on the screen? Tracy, what is that word?
Theater.
Theater. Okay. I'm just going to point at you, and when I point at you, I want you to tell me what word comes to mind when you hear the word theater. Okay, Tracy, I'll start with you. You said the word. What comes to mind for you when you hear? What other words comes to mind for you when you hear the word theater?
The sets and the costumes and everything that makes a theater experience exciting for me when I go.
Okay, good.
So excitement, I guess, would be my one-word answer.
All right. What word?
Movie.
Movie.
Music.
Music. Okay, Jordan. What word comes to mind to you? You weren't listening to Dad, were you? So you came here to listen to Dad, and you weren't listening a word that comes to mind when you go to the theater. Well, you can say another word. What word comes to mind for you? Popcorn. Okay. Okay, this is very interesting, isn't it? Now, what other words start with TH? Give me another word that starts with TH. The. Think. Theatrical. Lots of words, right? But none of you said those words. Why didn't you say those words? Let me tell you why you didn't say those words. You didn't say those words because the way our minds don't work alphabetically. Our minds work experientially, right? So when I say the word theater to you, you conjure up an experience, right? Now, some of you said movie, somebody else said something more theatrical. I had an aunt that lived on the island of Manhattan in the same apartment for like 46, 47 years before she passed away at the age of 96. She loved New York. We invited her, she was single, we invited her to come live in California. She refused, wanted to stay in New York. Now, when I say theater to Aunt Prudy, what do you think comes first to mind to her? Broadway, right? Because of her experience. That's the way our minds are organized. So understand this, I don't want to get overly scientific here, that we are teleogenic in nature. We move towards pictures. And our pictures are based on experiences that we have. And so one of the reasons that, for example, top athletes perform the way they perform is because they create a new reality in their minds. They create a new experience in their minds about what their future is going to look like. If you ever hear Peter Vidmar speak, and he spoke here 2 years ago, he'll tell you at the end of all those gymnastic workouts, what do? They went and stood on the, what? The medal stand, and gave each other the medals, and pictured themselves doing that. Why is that? Because they created a new reality, and their minds all of a sudden accepted that that was the new reality. What did David Lauren do to the rest of us with that London presentation? He created a new reality about Ralph Lauren for us, and new reality in his own company. Now, once you get something in your mind that clearly that you are trying to achieve and that you want to achieve, your subconscious mind all of a sudden starts believing that it's the present reality and won't accept anything else. And you have this filter in your mind, it's called a reticular activating system. And the reticular activating system filters out anything else that wants to get in that's not really relevant to you right now. It's the filter in your mind, for example, that keeps you from feeling all of the billions of hairs that exist all over your body. It's the filter right now for those of you that wear contact lenses that don't make you scratch your eyes right now, because it blocks that out for you. And only lets in information that's relevant to what your conscious and subconscious mind say is either a threat to you or important to you. So you want to understand that this is the way, when we start talking about innovation, we want to understand about how our minds work and what it means to really create a new reality in our minds. So the more diverse our knowledge is, the more diverse the knowledge is that our brain possesses, the more connections it can make when given fresh inputs of knowledge, and fresh inputs trigger the associations that lead to novel ideas. That's Steve Jobs' comment is, innovation is about connecting things. It's about generating enough diversity in your exposure to things and generating enough ideas that all of a sudden those things start occurring more naturally, more frequently, and those aha moments that we all hear about start occurring. Well, Creamer had it right. He was on the ski lift, right, when the idea for the coffee table book came to him. Why do those aha moments? Because all of a sudden, all those connections are being made in our moments, in our minds. So this is what we mean by associational thinking. Steve Jobs, for example, fired from Apple, goes and forms Next. It's kind of an esoteric computer company, but the software, he'll tell you, and the Stanford address that he gave, the software he developed there, and the Next organization became the platform for Apple when he was brought back to Apple. He goes off and buys Pixar while he's away from Apple. Starts understanding about how the whole entertainment industry works, which informs his whole approach to what? iTunes, right? And what he's doing with iTunes and all the whole download concept and how people are gonna receive entertainment and what kind of entertainment they wanna receive and so forth, so forth. J.K. Rowling, she lives in a country there where she's surrounded by castles and countryside. She loves to write. She has creative ideas in her mind, and she's on a train one day, and she's looking out at this beautiful countryside and passing these castles and so forth. And she said, there's a wizard, and he's a boy wizard, and he doesn't know he's a wizard. And all of these thoughts and connections start coming to her all of a sudden. The Beatles, Lennon and McCartney, they started off, a couple of them, first of all, listening to something called skiffle music in Liverpool, England. They started hearing American music, R&B and pop, the Everly Brothers and their harmonies. They would go across town to learn a new chord, and every time they learned a new chord, it expanded the kind of music they were able to do. They were playing at all of these gigs with other bands that were playing cover songs, and they were fourth or fifth in line playing their music, and all of a sudden, when it was time for them to get up and play, everybody else had already played all the songs that they had rehearsed. So they started playing the B-side of those songs, and then pretty soon they started saying, we better start writing our own music because everybody's already playing the cover songs. And so as they learned those chords, as they got exposed to new things, as their musical ability expanded, as you watched their music over their career, there was dramatic changes in the way that their music was what kind of music they presented to the world.
Come on, love.
This
Yeah,
is
I
a
think
segment
once
with
I remember when
Paul McCartney explaining a
Linda
little
and I
bit
just had our first baby, which was
about
Mary,
that
and
quiz.
we already had Heather, but our first baby together was Mary. And Mary was born, and I was at the hospital basically the whole week, you know, just while Linda recovered and took it easy, and we like the chips in this place too. So we were sitting around all week and just enjoying just having had this lovely baby. And there was this Picasso print on the wall of an old man playing a guitar. And I looked at it all week, and towards the end of the week I thought, what chord's he playing? You know, on the guitar, what is he playing? I noticed he just had two fingers here. You get that chord there, guys? Just two fingers there. And so I thought, well, I'll try and see, you know, what the chord is, if it sounds any good. So, ooh, that's nice, you know. So then I used that as the inspiration and tried to write a song that only used two fingers. So I played a bit of that. Please. Note carefully, two fingers all the time. My hand never leaves my wrist. Goes, that's how it goes anyway.
So you start getting the idea here of what we mean by this associational thinking. In that last segment there, the way that was set up was the interviewer saying, tell me a little bit about the creative process. How does that occur for you? He says, well, I don't know, you know, really how there's this kind of inspiration that comes. But then he described what we were just describing, right? This whole associational thinking. I'm looking at a picture, I see the guy's playing two chords. I wonder what chord he's playing. I wonder what it'd be like to play a complete song only using two fingers. What would that sound like? And that's how that particular segment evolved for him, and of course the rest is legendary about how the Beatles emerged and so forth. So as we think about this idea, I want to think about some of these major companies that, some of which you identified when you thought about those innovators, and we're not going to try to read all the words on here right now, but these right now are four major players in the technology arena, and when they each emerged, each of them were pretty focused on what they were doing. They weren't in each other's backyards, and all of a sudden, they're all in each other's backyards doing the same things and after the same kind of markets. And this whole article is about who's gonna rise to the top, who's gonna win this, basically this war that's going on right now. Because, Google is now, bought a company that's making phones for them, and Facebook wants to get into the entertainment business, and on and on and on. So, this is what happens when associational thinking starts taking place and starts taking root. So if that's the case, then we want to understand that this is a cognitive process that's going on. It's going on all the time in our minds, whether we wanted to or not. But if we want to be innovative and creative, if we want to push ideas out and into implementation, then what do we want to do? We want to think, well, how do I drive more associational thinking then? Because if that's the key to innovation, then how do I make that more of a predictable thing in my life? And what do these great innovators do that makes them, really create something that is of worth and actually makes money doing it? Well, what we want to understand here is, as we look at cognitive skills, then cognitive skills are going to be driven in part by certain behavioral skills that we develop. And those behavioral skills, we want to really focus on cognitive skills that are going to give us this broad diversity that we talked about earlier. Because that's what really is going to have this multiplier effect in what we do. And that's the point that we want to reach, is where these ideas are coming so quickly that our problem really is, now how do I create more focus with them? How do I start getting them implemented? Because I understand now how my mind works in creating the ideas that I want to create. So associational thinking then really is driven by four key issues and four key behaviors that we start getting very good at. One of which is questioning, the second is observing, the third is networking, and the fourth is experimenting. So let's talk about these each just a little bit. Before we do that though, we're going to do an innovation exercise here. Okay, I need somebody to come up here and help me with something. Corey, you're our host, right? Could you come here and be a big host for us, okay? Okay. Okay, here's what we're going to do, really quickly. You're going to be our scribe and write in big letters here. Really quick, we're going to have an experience here in innovation together. And we're going to create success out of something that failed, right here in this room, right now. All right? So here's what I want to do first of all. I want to go around the room just very quickly. If I point at you, first thing I want you to do is tell me just one thing you're interested in. It can be anything. Don't try to filter it out, just anything. As long as it's appropriate for this room, just go ahead and say it, okay? Anything. Okay, David?
I'm going to write that down here, right?
And you write it down, right? We're going to do this really quickly. One thing you're interested in.
Guns.
Okay?
Songwriting.
Songwriting.
Guns N' Roses, huh?
Travel.
Travel.
Art.
Art.
How to take different entertainment ideas to larger companies.
Okay, entertainment. Can I say entertainment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Politics.
Politics. Okay, that's good. If you tear that off and just stick that up on the door. Okay, here's the next thing I want to put up there. I want to know the last place that you went on vacation that you liked. The last place you went on vacation that you liked.
San Diego.
San Diego.
Bass Lake.
Italy.
Italy. Okay.
Grand Junction, Colorado.
Okay. No, next to you there. You gotta get better point.
Nabu.
Okay. Okay, stick that right over here someplace, Corey. That'll do. That'll do. That's not how you spell it. That's not how you spell it. But they know how to spell it either. Okay, here's the next thing I want to know. How many of you live here in Rancho Santa Margarita? Okay, those, don't be afraid to raise your hands, okay, or close by. Quarterly cause accounts, okay, raise your hands, don't be afraid. Okay, help me out here. The Borders bookstore that just closed up here, along with all the other Borders that closed. I want you really quickly to make a list of the other shops that are right by there, restaurants and other stores that are right by there. So help me out here, just start shouting them out.
Cinnamon Productions.
Cinnamon Productions,
Wood Ranch Grill.
What is it?
Wood Ranch.
Wood Ranch, Coles Found,
Use it up.
Use It Up.
Library.
The Bed Bath and Beyond thing?
Coles is, yeah, kind of down a ways from there, okay. Going down that row, anything else you can think of?
Oh, all
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
There's a beauty salon of some sort.
Okay, beauty salon, okay. Anything else we're thinking about?
You know, read it on there?
You got El Torito. Okay, stick that up in the word. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. Just in the rows that you are, you're by yourself, so you go with this row right here. Just the row that you're in right now, and Vera, you join with this last row up here. You're a group, and here's your assignment, okay? And you've got 4 minutes to do this. Borders just closed. You're gonna open a new bookstore there that's going to succeed. You've just learned about associational thinking and what it means. We have just done a little bit of questioning here to get a few ideas going about unrelated issues, but perhaps related issues that could form an idea for a bookstore that might work where Borders fail. So you've got 4 minutes to get together and decide on a plan of how you might develop a bookstore there that's going to work. Look at these things and anything else you want to talk about. Try to do some associational thinking and come up with 1 or 2 ideas you think will work, okay? Now, the leader of the group is whoever woke up earliest this morning. So that's the first thing you decide. Find out who woke up earliest this morning, and that's who's the leader of the group, okay? So you got 4 minutes, go. We're gonna share.
All right.
I didn't get out of bed.
I thought I did. That's what coffee shops that make stuff. Italian.
So Borders are less than papers, more right? So one of the guys I have, you have your interactive tables, you have paper and or you can have a whole series, you know, whatever books. I see you can browse online directories. I like that.
Yeah, you can have
Discount and just, you know, take the tax. That was so much, you know, and the discount would be taken.
Cheaper than Amazon, because Amazon can
So, you know, people
you can buy
just
like
download
Kindle and stuff, then you can download it straight there. Think about Amazon.
Well, you can do that. You can have an additional.
Maybe it's more interactive. You better just.
2 more minutes. So make sure I'm making notes of some of your ideas so you can do a little sharing here.
What's going to draw them
When you can have that specialist guy, you know, that
come up with something different than that.
Well, we find all that. I agree.
Okay, 1 more minute, so you're wrapping up your thoughts.
When you go to get a massage, it's like very like peaceful. Usually people want to read, they want a quiet place to go to where they have free Wi-Fi.
Okay, let's wrap it up. You don't have too much money on the line, but I heard a lot of good discussion going on. There's a lot of really enthusiastic ideas being thrown around. I kind of like the vibe I was hearing going on over here. So who was your leader of this group? Did you decide?
I guess they decided.
Tell me your name again.
Dave Sharp.
Dave. Just tell us a couple of the ideas that you guys came up with about a bookstore that's going to work there.
Well, Borders had, hard copy books and they had their cafe, and, it's kind of cool to be able to go in there and you can just, relax and grab a magazine or a book or whatever, but, so, we kind of thought about, well, what if you had, you had tables, you have more of a cafe, where you had different types of foods and whatever, but on your tables you have computer screens. And then you could have a full array of electronic media, whether it's books, music, video, whatever, that you could plug into. You'd have headphone jacks right at the table, you can just plug in. And you could, while you're eating and whatever, you can be reading right on your computer screen, and if you decide you want to buy something, you can just buy it right there.
Oh, okay.
You could have, in addition, on a particular evening of the week, you could have political discussions, you could have poetry readings, you could have
Good. Okay.
local
Good.
music competitions,
Good.
whatever.
All right. Who else wants to share some ideas that they had? Felt like they had some pretty good ideas. Kind of a high bar set here. All right.
Well, one of the ideas we had was because Borders is losing because people are buying the books online electronically rather than in hard copy. And in order to sell books in hard copy, one market that you really want to aim at is probably children, because children, especially young children, they don't want to do things on a computer. They want to have the book in their hands. So if we were to organize it, if we were to gear it toward that, maybe have some like story time, have like the really big kind of books you may have seen. We also thinking about some of the ideas with like they were talking about with some of the food, the restaurant type things.
Good. Good thoughts.
Food for kids, probably.
Yeah. Other ideas that anybody else had that they want to share? Jose, you want to?
We had a lot about the interactive thing, but we would like stations where you can scroll through a book and it'll read the summary for you or give you some sort of video to track you
Good.
to the book, as well as areas that can be used for having public seminars or like classes for all ages, like family ones or discussions and lectures about whatever topics about books or about specifically about books or about the book.
Good. Very, very good.
Real quick, I want to go in a completely different direction. One of the problems I saw with Borders has to do with the rising cost of lease and space. So you consolidate into a much smaller area, similar to like a internet cafe, where you can go and you can scan the internet for what you want, whatever you want. You have exclusive rights with the author. You print it off on a CD and you pay for the CD and leave.
Some great thoughts. Now, you're getting the idea here, right? You see what starts happening when you're given just even a little bit of data and you set your mind to kind of this associational thinking idea, what really starts happening is there's like little flashes of brilliance start really coming out. And this can be engineered when we approach the innovation process using the same kinds of tools that the great innovators use. Just so you have some idea here, this exercise has been done by some real bookstores that have kind of looked at things for themselves. This is one in Brookline, Massachusetts. We try to have everybody buy a book and something else, says co-owner Dana Brigham. A third of the floor space gets seated to products that complements nearby books, spatulas and wine stoppers next to cookbooks, or vases and floral stationery in the garden section. The associational thinking that's going on there. This is another one in Bellingham, Washington. leased an espresso book machine which can print a 200-page professional-looking book in 10 minutes. The store now produces out-of-print books for customers and lets self-published authors host readings and print their own books on the spot. And a third one, last one here, bookstore in Brooklyn, New York, began streaming in-store readings live on its website, bookcourt.tv. Viewers can get their books signed and mailed to them. We want people that are watching in Minnesota to feel that they're at the event, or even people in Manhattan that don't want to come down to Brooklyn. So you go online, you watch what's going on, you can order the book right there. So you see what can start happening when this associational thinking starts taking hold in what we're doing. So one of the things that we want to understand then, as we talk about those behaviors then that's going to drive this cognitive process called associational thinking, is the first step is really questioning, learning to ask the right kind of questions. Innovators treat the world as one giant question mark. And that's one of the things that you want to get as a part of your practice if you want innovation to be part of your life. This is a quote from a great book that was written about innovation called The Innovator's DNA. And Clay Christensen and some of his partners in this book said this. He said, suspended comfortably between faith in and doubt of their maps, the best innovators remember that their views of the world are never the actual territory. Intuitively, they rely on a rich assortment of questions to develop a deep understanding of how things really are before probing intensely into what they might be. Now, I'm going to move through this really quickly, but one of the kinds of questions we want to ask is what is? And just to give you an example, in our firm, we get inquiries that come through our website, we get inquiries that come through webinars that we put on, and different questions that are asked. But very commonly a question that will be asked is, in one way or another, they're saying, how much compensation should I be paying our people? We'll say, well, we can answer that question, we can tell you what market data says, but we can also tell you it's not the right question to ask. The right question to ask is, the question we're going to ask is, what is the outcome you're looking for? What is the behavior you want produced? What is it your business model is trying to drive right now? Because your compensation strategy is going to have to drive and reinforce your compensation model. So it's a what is question, it's not a how much question. What caused questions? Mike Collins runs a company called the Big Idea Group. And the Big Idea Group is actually, they look for inventors, they look for ideas that can now be taken and driven into the marketplace. And they drive them into the marketplace and make them happen. And he had a guy come to him and pitch this idea once that said, yeah, I have this idea for it's a card game that families would play. It takes them about 15 minutes and kind of here's how it would work and so forth. And he just didn't see how it was going to work and was ready to kind of give him the Simon Cowell treatment of the whole thing. And then he said, he paused and he asked this question. He says, well, what caused you to think about this idea? He says, well, I'm a dad. I've got 4 kids at home that are important to me. I go to work all day, every day, and I come home and I have limited time to spend with them, but I want to have some interactive time. And this is something I would use with my kids to have 15 minutes of interactive time, have fun together, learn something together, and be able to do that. Well, what happened there was this turned into, what do these call there, 12-something questions, or 12-minute games is what they are, 12-minute games that are sold in Target and a lot of other stores that have just really kind of exploded. They're 12-minute card games that families can play together in 12 to 15 minutes. But had Mike Collins never asked the what caused question in that instant, he would have blown right past a really good idea and not seen it coming. Mark Benioff, some of you may be familiar with something that's called Salesforce.com and something that came out of that called Chatter.com. He asked what we call why and why not questions. He was working really in a different realm entirely, but had to be pushing through marketing ideas in the organization that he was working for. Decided to take a sabbatical. He went to India for a while to kind of see what was going on technologically over there. I went over and visited some friends in Hawaii, and while he was swimming with the dolphins, remember when the coffee table book I did came, that Kramer was skiing, right? So he was swimming with the dolphins, and he said to himself, why are business applications technologically not more like Amazon and eBay? In other words, at that point in time, you bought software, you loaded it onto your computer instead of it existing out here in some cloud on the internet. And so he came up with the whole Salesforce.com as a result of that. And then once he had Salesforce.com developed, he came up with the idea of Chatter.com. And Chatter.com came because somebody sent him a message through Facebook, one of his employees, and he said, why aren't all these business applications more like Facebook, where companies can get on and interact with each other about projects they're working on and so forth. And there's a stream of consciousness there, just like there is in Facebook. And hence something called Chatter.com was born. So why and why not questions is a way that we want to approach things as well. Sorry, I just went through all that. If you want to become a multiplier, ask great questions. There's a book out right now called Multipliers, and it talks about the whole idea of multipliers versus diminishers. It's really a leadership book, but it's a great book if you pick it up, because it talks about the idea that great leaders learn to ask the right kinds of questions. That's what they're really great at doing. And getting people to think differently as a result of the questions that they ask people. Observation. Most innovators are intense observers. This is something that, again, was said in that same book that I referenced earlier. As they engage in observations, they begin to connect common threads across unconnected data. Remember what Steve Jobs said about innovation is really just about connecting things, which may provoke uncommon business ideas. Such observations often engage multiple senses and are frequently prompted by compelling questions. Who knows what anthropology is? What's anthropology? Not archaeology. Say it louder.
It's the study of man.
Okay,
Humankind.
it's really a study of humanity, is it not? And really kind of anthropology's basic concerns about really what defines human life and society, what are our social relationships like, and why are they like that, and so forth. Okay, here's another question for you. Who's the greatest anthropologist of our time?
Margaret Mead.
What's that?
Margaret Mead.
Margaret Mead?
Yeah, that's the only one I can think of.
Okay. Any other guesses? You guys didn't get a clue from early on in this meeting when I was trying to clue you to some things here. The greatest thing. Greatest anthropologist of our time, in my opinion, is Jerry Seinfeld.
Is this true though? You don't use a BlackBerry?
No. Oh, no. Do you have a BlackBerry?
I do have a BlackBerry, yeah.
I don't. My wife has one, and I find the BlackBerry people, their eyes, their pupils don't focus. They seem to be, they always hold it in their hand, because this is what BlackBerry commands them to do. And they listen to what you're saying, and they compare it to what is on the BlackBerry, which is really more interesting here to me. Don't they do that? And you know what? I think there's more buttons here than on your face. And I said slow head down. You know the slow head down? I mean, do we even know what rudeness is anymore? I mean, can I just pick up a magazine, put it in front of your face, and read it while you're talking? Is that okay?
No, I'm saying, what about the iPhone? The iPhone that's what all the cool people use. Yeah. Has your wife been tempted by the iPhone?
Yeah, sure, it's got all that stuff. All my pretentious show business friends have the iPhone. But you know, you can't slam the iPhone down when you're mad. That's what I don't like. I never want to talk to you again the rest of my life.
Okay, so to become a great innovator, become Jerry Seinfeld. You got to learn to observe people and what's going on around you. Great innovators, you don't think Steve Jobs spent a lot of time observing what people do, what they want, how they behave, even to the point of what he wanted their experience to be like when they opened the box of an Apple product. And the amount of design and engineering that went into the box that an Apple product would come out of. This is, again, from my sordid mind, one of the cartoonist who doesn't do this anymore. Jerry Larson, can you see that? Anthropologists, these are all the cave moments. The anthropologists come in, so they're putting the TVs away and all that. Like I said, if you don't relate to some of these things, then I warned you ahead of time about where we were going with there. Well, what do you observe? Well, you observe customers and how they react or use products. You observe companies, particularly those companies that you admire. Observe something that you're passionate about. Spend a lot of time thinking about it and where it's headed. Observe with all of your senses, particularly where that's where you have an opportunity to use all your senses. What things smell like, what the experience is like when you're someplace. And then write and record what you observe. Very important. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. To be a successful innovator, you must learn to test your ideas through a broad network of diverse individuals. So this is all about networking and what we do. Albert Einstein said, what a person does on his own without being stimulated by the thoughts and experiences of others is even in the best of cases, rather paltry and monotonous. So if you want to innovate, you better get used to getting out and being exposed to other people and a diverse group of people, and you better get used to rejection. And having people say, you know, that's really a bad idea. And really want that, and want to hear those kinds of things, and take that information and then have that inform what it is that you're going to do. It's really about engineering a diversity of experiences we talked about earlier. So whatever you do from a networking standpoint, make sure that diversity is involved with it. If you're just dealing with a homogeneous group of people all the time in what you do, then you're going to have a difficulty pushing your ideas out and getting them where you want to go. So networking then really has to do with getting feedback, it has to do with learning, it has to do with getting connected, it has to do with increasing a diversity of exposure, it has to do with collaboration. Collaboration is a large part of innovation. If you want to learn to accelerate the amount of innovation you're able to kind of produce and push through, then accelerate the amount of networking you do. Where to network? Well, form a networking group and focus on diversity. Attend networking events. You're doing that tonight. Way to go. Kudos for that. Start a mealtime networking plan. One of the things I started doing about a year ago was the practice of once a week having lunch with somebody, and a whole variety of people. And obviously part of that is because of the business experience I'm going to have from doing that, but there's a lot more to it than that. Broadening your network of exposure and people becomes an important way to start having that occur in your life, innovation occur in your life. What should be your focus? Your focus should be learning from other people. It shouldn't be about you, it should be more about them, because that's part of the observing process. Get feedback, learn to take rejection. Experimenting. Jeff Bezos, who knows who Jeff Bezos is? He's the Amazon guy, right? A little bit about his story and how this whole experimentation works. He was working for a Wall Street investment firm, and they were experimenting all the time with new business opportunities. And back in 1994, the internet was pretty immature, but he saw something interesting. He said that the internet was growing at a rate of 2,300% a year. He says, humans are not very good at understanding the concept of exponential growth. And he says this was staggering to him. So he decided, what would people buy remotely? And he decided what they would purchase remotely would be something similar to what they would do in mail order. So we started looking at, well, what are people buying through mail order things? Mostly standard products. And he said, well, books are a pretty standard product. Why are people not buying books? And he learned that, well, to catalog all the books in the world in some kind of hardbound thing would be an impossibility because there's so many books to build that kind of catalog. But he saw that online you could do that. You could build a whole catalog of books online. And so he experimented with that idea, and when he went to do it, once he dedicated his mind to do it, within a year later, Amazon was born as the Earth's biggest bookstore. He used an outsourced company to provide all of the books as a wholesaler or warehouse. So he began offering the largest selection of books anywhere without having made any investment in stores, warehouses, or inventory. So you see what associational thinking is like and where it can lead to and what it's about. In his experimentation, what happened? There was research. Research is part of experimentation. Questioning, then more research. Identified a gap. No one was cataloging books for sale. Made connections, internet, wholesalers, standard product. Associational thinking going on. what we want to understand about these elements is that they're not sequential, they're dynamic. These things are occurring all at the same time, and we want to make sure that we're involved with all of them so we get the dynamic working in the direction that it's supposed to go. Well, putting it all together for you, let me just make one mention here about that AHA Institute I talked about earlier. Not having this presentation in mind necessarily, when I went about thinking about this whole idea of the AHA Institute, I started making notes to myself and started, doing the same kind of things you do, getting ideas down on paper and so forth, and spending some time on the computer. Then during lunch, when I have lunch with some of these people, I started exposing some of these ideas to them, getting feedback from them. They would ask questions, I would ask questions of them, and so on and so forth. Then I got a group of people together and did a webinar. I kind of presented the idea to them, had them stay afterward and give me feedback about what was going on about that idea. And over that period of time, what started out as one idea over here has turned into a different idea over here. Now as I go to launch that business, because of that process I've been involved with, I've been informed in a different way through that associational thinking that I've been able to engineer. Now, you see people standing in the hallway. They want you pull that, you don't pull that door closed a minute. I think we got just another 5 minutes here, then we'll have you off to the next class. Yeah. If you think about this, when you think about our approach to execution, then once we have this idea down of associational thinking, the next thing that we want to understand, I'm going to move through this really quickly because we're just about out of time, is something that's called cognitive awareness. How many of you ever heard the word cognitive before? Not cognitive, but cognitive. Anybody heard that concept? This is a real critical concept to understand. Yeah, let me get to the slide I want to get to, and then I'll explain to you. Cognitive skills have to do with this. The cognitive part of our brain measures intelligence. The affective part of our brain deals with our emotions. The cognitive drives how one acts on those thoughts and on those feelings. So when we're dealing with the cognitive part of the brain, we're talking about the part of our brain that tells us why are we more inclined to do one thing versus another? And why are we better at one thing than another thing? That's that part of our brain that tells us that. So our cognitive brain is going to really divide us into generally 4 categories. At least a lady by the name of Kathy Colby has come up with a concept that she calls the Colby Index that puts you in one of 4 categories. You're either a fact finder, a follow-through, a fast start, or an implementer. And you want to understand what kind of person you are if you're going to be approaching innovation, because it's going to affect how you approach what you do. So fact finders are just what it sounds like. Those are people that need a lot of data before they'll get started on anything. Follow-through people are people that once you give them all the details of what needs to be done, they're going to go out and they're going to make it all happen. They're going to be great at implementing. They're operational types of people. Fast starts, or sometimes referred to as quick starts, are people that you give them, 30 seconds of information. Got it. I'm out. I'm organizing, and I'm on my way. Get out of my way. I'm going to do it right now. And implementers are those people that you find in working in their garages, tinkering with things, putting things together, building things, and so on and so forth. Now, Kathy Colby does something she calls the Colby Index, and it is really kind of ranks where you are in each of these and gives you a score. For example, I'm about a 7 on a fast start. I'm about a 6 on a fact finder. I'm about a 5 on a follow through, and I'm about a 2 on an implementer. So, as my wife will tell you, don't ask me to put something together. But I need a certain amount of fact finding, but once I do, then I'm going to roll into it. I think we closed at 8:15, right?
10:10.
Oh, 8:10? Oh, okay. And we've got to wrap this up here. So one of the things that you want to do, and I would encourage you to go to something called Colby.com and determine what your Colby score is. Because that's going to inform who you're going to collaborate with and how you're going to interact and the kinds of things that you're going to want to do as you approach that. Well, I hope you got some good ideas here. There's some information we didn't get to about how we turn some of these things into action items. If you come up afterwards and get my card, I'll be happy to send those slides to you, and you can then look at the rest of the information that we didn't get to tonight as well. Thank you for being here, and enjoy the rest